The most important place to start with a book about practicing Jesus is why. Why Jesus? What's so great about Jesus? What can Jesus do for me or for anyone? How can a man who lived 2,000 years ago in a very different culture on the other side of the world, if you're living in America as I do, how is he going to make me better? Make everything better? We need to start with that question for the simple reason that being a Christian is always and only about following Jesus, about doing what he did, listening to what he said, and trying to incorporate it into our lives and seeing what happens. Now, many Christians go to great lengths to answer this question. There are entire books written about it, why Jesus, full of theories and complex answers. But I think it actually comes down to two simple letters. Okay. Jesus lived and modeled a deep-seated security and confidence that everything is okay. He's okay, you're okay, I'm okay, everything is okay. And I would say that this is the spiritual and emotional and psychological foundation upon which a life of discipleship rests, upon which we build our lives. Jesus lived from this deep-seated security and confidence. Now, I know that if you're a first world person, as I am, that okay hardly sounds like a superlative. It seems more like a just word, like it's just okay. The weather is just okay. The food was just okay. My job is just okay. But if when we turn to the Bible, there's this sense of trust. Trust in the steadfast love of God expressed over and over and over again, so that I would argue this is the primary experience of God for the believer, along with fear of the Lord, which we'll come back to later. But we see it in the Psalms, for example, the famous 23rd Psalm. Many people know this one. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, the valley of shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Psalm 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Now that's okay, wouldn't you say? Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you think that it's not enough. That great is okay. The best is okay. The most is okay. Everything else is not really okay, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. You might think to yourself, well, if I were living hungry, or in famine, or in war, or with chronic illness, or unemployed, or with lack of opportunity, or loss of loved ones, okay would be okay, but that's not where we live. In fact, you and I spend most of our lives trying to rise above okay. So I'd like you to take a moment to turn to your journal and jot down what's your gut feeling about okay. Find your own words to express what you think about okay. Now, I'm going to argue that when you really think about all the consequences of okay, okay is as good as it gets. That to be okay, to feel okay, to live okay in spite of everything that's not going to be okay, in spite of everything that's not seemingly okay right now, but to still have that sense would be super. To live that deep-seated balance, permeating your thoughts and emotions and efforts. So I invite you to take another moment now and imagine for yourself, what would okay be like? What would it live like? To feel that in the pit of your stomach. Just jot down the specifics of what your life would live like if you were okay. And if you're struggling with this idea, try going at it through what I call the back door. Evaluate the quality of your life right now and jot down the places where you're not okay. And then imagine them transformed. What would this not okay feel like had it become okay? Now, I know this is hard, which is why I started here. But imagine a worst comes to worst situation in your life. Imagine, for example, when Jesus is standing on trial for his life, face to face with Pontius Pilate, the man who has the power of life and death over him. And Pilate asks him, "Where do you come from?" And Jesus gave him no answer. And Pilate says, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you realize I have the power either to free you or crucify you?" And Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above." It's so tempting for us to write off this as bravado or otherworldliness on Jesus' part, as in, because he was the Son of God, he knew it was going to be okay no matter what happened because he could already see the future. And he knew it would be, although it was going to be a really bad day, in 3 days it was going to be fine. So he wouldn't have the same experience that we would have were we in his shoes. But the fact of the matter is the Gospels tell us that Jesus was in great distress. The story of the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's praying to God, "Please take this cup away from me, but not your will, not my will, but your will be done." But even when he's dying on the cross, his words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Those are hardly the words of someone who's 100% okay. And yet, nonetheless, there are these blips. But God's steadfast love and goodness is what Jesus based his life on, and it is the ultimate benefit of a faithful life. Being able, or at least willing, to embrace the good and the bad and still live the peace of okay. Notice I said embrace, not grit our teeth and bear it, not hold our noses and wade through it, but embrace with all that means. Trusting. Most of us aren't there, which is why faith is a challenge. Maybe our lives haven't seen a lot of steadfast goodness, people who are worthy of our trust. Maybe any number of things have happened to us that we don't even remember, that have made us fearful and suspicious and anxious. So I'd like to do a little exercise in self-awareness here, knowing how we really think and feel and act, and hopefully why. So I ask you a few questions to jot down in your journal. Where are you on the spectrum of trust? Do you see people as good or as dangerous? Do you see the world and life as a battlefield or a celebration? Or something in between? And most importantly, do you know why? Was it something your parents taught you? Was it something you lived? Something you came to by marriage? Just take a moment. Now, okay, might sound delusional, crazy, given the micro and macro realities of our lives. And from one perspective, it is. If we fear death, right now, every one of us is dying. Perhaps not today or tomorrow or in the near future, but every day is one day less that we get to live. So how can we be okay? How can I be okay with that? Which is the whole point. At the heart of the Christian faith is Jesus. This God event being with us as one of us. This God event defying and defeating death. The only thing that really makes everything not okay for us. Having God with us in Jesus, and by the power of the resurrection, we no longer need fear death. That is the big brass ring, if you will, of okay, hanging right there. How do we grab it? How do we convince ourselves that it's not an illusion? So I invite you, how would you practice okay? How would you bring it into your life? If you're at a loss for ideas, I admit that I am from time to time too. And that's when we can turn to Jesus to follow as a model. When Jesus was at the point of death, his words were, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. I commit my spirit. And so perhaps as you go through your day and every time you feel not okay creeping on you, pause, take a breath, and say the prayer, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Your worries and your fears and your resentments and failures and shortcomings and misdeeds and the things you wish you could do over, just hand them over to God. Allow God to take it as a burden off of your heart and mind. I found that just being able to name the things that unsettle me takes some of their power away from my spirit. So try that and see where you are with okay. And may God bless you. Until next time.